Hello, I'm Rex Childhouse, and in August 2021, because the internet loses a lot of date references, I bought a Presa i3 Mark III S Plus 3D printer. Was totally impressed by the quality. And very shortly after, also in August, because of the quality of the basic printer, I bought the Prusa MMU2 Plus or MMU2S multi-material unit attachment for it. And that was problematic from day one. About 10 days ago, I think it was, today is November 8th, 2021, I sent it back to Presa for a refund, and still waiting for it to be processed. In this video, I'm going to address some of the issues I've had with the basic printer. There's only been a couple. I'm really happy with it. It's a lot of fun. My wife loves it because I'm printing all sorts of stuff from Thingiverse and other sources on the internet for her. And I'm going to address the issues I've got with the MMU. I would love the MMU to work correctly, consistently. It has not. It has been frustrating from day one, and getting help out of Presa Tech support, sometimes it was helpful, sometimes it was not, but we never resolved the issues. So I'm going to get into it in detail and show you what I thought. And I will also tell you that searching this in social media, I'm going to say 50% of the people who came up and said they had MMU2s absolutely loved them. Thought they were the greatest thing in the world. 40% of them that had them said they didn't like them and they reverted to single filament printing, and 10% hadn't made a decision yet. I'm in the 40%. I would love Presa to figure it out. I would love to put it back on my system. I would love to have it on my system working consistently, and that's the key. Consistently and reliably. So let's get into it. A couple of issues with the basic printer and a couple of kudos to Presa. First of all, they give you the tools that you need to put it together. What I wish they would add to their tool, though, is a hex driver, a screwdriver type driver. I think it's for their 2.5 millimeter hex or Allen screws. That would just make it a whole lot easier to go together. Next is their manuals, really well detailed, really well shown, presented, except I think the images are a little small, and I wish, as shown here, I wish the arrows, the highlights were from inside the image, starting outside the image to make it a little easier. I'm slightly vision impaired. This was tough for me. I had to copy them, take them to my computer, blow them up, and see exactly what was happening, or call my wife to help them out. And Presa, a kudo, tells you how to resolve a number of their assembly issues. Here's one that I use. I have several technical degrees. My specialty or my career is aviation, flying military aircraft, highly complex, but putting them together is not part of our job. Here's how I put a lot of the hex nuts into their receivers. I put them on the end, running in 1 or 2 threads, just enough to stabilize it, stuck the hex nut into the hole, and then put the proper screw in from the proper side until I got contact with my insertion bolt, my insertion screw, and then I took the insertion screw out and continued the assembly. Worked really well, and I like it. And I appreciate the humor in the assembly. They give you a Haribo gold bears, I think is what they're called, and really good. My granddaughter loves them. I'm allergic to them. Oh well. The only issue I've had really with the base printer was the thermistor, whatever it's called, sensor underneath the hotbed. Following the instructions as shown here, because of the movement of the bed back and forth on the y-axis, it cut into the cable. So I had to repair that. I'm an amateur radio operator. I've built robots. I do a fair amount of electronic assembly. I don't design things. It's within my capabilities. I had to splice it together, soldered it together, and it's up to working. I think the openings in this assembly need to be a little bit bigger than they are. This is the MMU installed on my Presa printer, and to bring up some of the points, I think this PTFE tube should be about an inch longer, maybe 2 inches longer. I don't think its length is critical. I think it can be adjusted without a major issue. It's just really close to no shorter than length as it is. Some of the issues I had with the MMU was it would not reset left to right to index back to the correct filament alignment hole, and so I would have in my G code, I would have filament number 1. It would be on filament number 3, and it would drive filament number 1 through the device into the air, and there's nothing in the PTFE tube, nothing going to the extruder. Or it would have filament through, say, filament number 3 down to the extruder, and it would try to index left to right, not realizing that there was filament already in the tube, so it couldn't move left to right. It would crash out on that. It couldn't pull the filament out, or it wouldn't pull the filament out at the end of some prints. It pulls the filament back at the end of other prints. It does not. I had all sorts of issues with it. And in the background you can hear my Presa printer printing off. I'm happy with the printer. Here's some of the, I saved some of the filament. I did not save most of it, didn't save all of it. The Bondtech gear, the drive gear between the extruder and in the MMU itself, doesn't matter. Both Bondtech gears, both drive gears did this. They gouged the filament because the filament was jammed somewhere, or maybe the extruder wasn't trying to move it and the MMU was. Maybe the MMU wasn't trying to move it, the extruder was. I don't know. But the drive gears, the Bondtech gears, gouged the filament so that they couldn't grab the filament anymore. Now you're stuck. Now you have to take the PTFE tube between the MMU and the extruder head off and pull this stuff out. If you do that, you need to remove the pressure from the Bondtech gear, the drive gear, and the extruder. In this image, this is the screw you need to back off or take out. I'm in the process of doing a cold pull, and because the filament has been damaged by the Bondtech, the drive gear has been narrowed, and it's cooled down inside the filament, inside the extruder head, what's probably going to happen is this is going to break. This filament's going to break and leave a segment of the filament inside the extruder. Now, there's some guidelines on the Presa page about how to heat that out. I will tell you, for me, it didn't work. When I did take my extruder head apart, just disappointed with how it was working, could not get the filament to feed through it, couldn't get it to heat through, couldn't follow anything else. I took the extruder apart and actually pulled out 3 pieces of filament from inside the extruder assembly itself. This long piece was between the Bondtech or the drive gear and the nozzle. That was the first piece going down. Then the second piece that you see here was the piece below that, and those are both solid, but they're segmented pieces, and below that was a third piece about the same size as the small piece, and when I touched that, it just powderized. It was burned to a crisp, which is probably why it wouldn't melt and probably wouldn't flow, was because it had been burned. And I had to take the hot end apart, and when I did, I got more problems. So I put the hot end back together, I put the nozzle back in, I put the heat sink, the big brass, the big aluminum casing that goes on these threads that you see here. I put them all back together. I used the measurements as close as I could from Presa, because you don't put the nozzle in tight to the block. And after that, what would happen is filament would ooze out the top of the hot end and fall down onto the print. When it fell down onto the print, now the nozzle, because it's so close to the print, grabs that glob and then it pulls the print off the hotbed, and the print's wasted. The print's destroyed. Time and time again, I cleaned this 3 or 4 times. I reset the heist. I adjusted the heist by a 1/16 of a turn, up and down numerous times. I never got it to solve. I finally solved it by buying a new entire hot end for $100 US, give or take a couple of bucks. This is the Presa Buffer, and in my opinion, it's a poor design. Once you manage to get access to the filament, which has a memory so it wants to curl all over the place, you're going to have to grab it with needle nose pliers, as it's shown here, and then 3/4 of an inch at a time you're going to have to push it through the PTFE tube up to the MMU, 24 to 30 inches, whatever. It's a long pull. Why don't you have greater access to it? There's got to be a better solution. So the first thing I did was went over to Thingiverse, searched it, and I found another buffer, and I printed these 2 pieces. I didn't print the entire buffer out. I printed these 2 pieces to see how it worked. Didn't quite care for how it worked, so I went to another system. I made some cleats using Fusion 360, anchored the tubes together, the PTFE tubes from the MMU to the towards the dry boxes, put the filaments in dry boxes. If you don't know, your filaments should be stored in dry boxes. They absorb moisture and it's an issue. And put the cleats on them, put the dry boxes in, put the filaments on rollers in the dry boxes, and it worked, and I had no problems. A number of these prints images are downloaded from the Presa site. This is their suggested layout for the buffer and how they want their reels, how they recommend the reels be set up, the filament reels be set up. It's a lot of curves, it's a lot of bends, and every one of those bends gives you drag, and they're also out absorbing moisture. There's got to be a better way, and I just went to the way that I created, I guess, trial and error, and I was pretty happy with it, and it reduced filament drag to an absolute minimum. I can't imagine getting it any less, and it also keeps the filament in the dry boxes as long as possible. It's a recommendation. If you're going to put the MMU2 system on your printer, I think it's a great concept. I just had issues with it. As I said, probably 50% of the people I talked to loved it, 40% hated it, 10% were undecided. I'm in the 40%, and I'm sorry, once they solve some issues with it, I'd love to have it back on my system. It's really convenient. If you're going to put it on your system, here's my recommendations. If you're going to use the buffer, assemble it first. Then assemble the MMU itself, and then attach the MMU to the printer. The way Presa has it set up is the very first thing you do is disable your printer by removing, upgrading the extruder head. And then, while it's sitting there dead, where you can't do anything, you're now putting the MMU2 system together, and you can't use your printer. You're putting your buffer together. You can't use your printer. My wife is getting annoyed. Hey, what are you doing? I got some Thingiverse stuff I want you to print. My recommendation is you build it out of order from the Presa instructions. Buffer, then MMU, then one day, and it took me over 2 days to put this together. One day, take the extruder apart, attach the MMU modifications to it, put it back together, and you're back up and running. So you only lose 1 day. I think I lost 3 days of printing, which my wife wasn't real happy about. One of the issues I like about computers is consistency. 0 is always 0, 0 is never O, O is never 0, 1 is never uppercase I type thing. Dealing with Presa tech support, and it got frustrating sometimes. Sometimes they're extremely helpful, sometimes they weren't. They wanted to know what the IR sensor read. I kept telling them, and I sent them this image, I don't have an IR sensor. What do you want? I never got an answer. I'm not sure exactly what it is. I simply don't remember. Back in the instruction manual, you put the IR sensor in, and the IR sensor has a different name, whether it's the PINDA or FINDA or filament sensor, whatever. I can't tell you right now, but I wish they would use consistent terms. And that would have been a whole lot less annoying than it was, because they kept asking me for the filament sensor reading, and the IR sensor reading, and I have no IR sensor reading to give them. So to wrap this up, summarize it, I bought the Presa i3 Mark III S Plus printer in August 2021. Shortly thereafter, added the MMU2S system to it. Fought that system for way too long, problematic from day one, and finally took it off, sent it back to Presa, waiting for the refund right now. Wondering exactly what's going to happen with that. Today is November 8th, 2021. Sitting next to me at my computer is my Presa I Mark III S Plus printer, happily printing, and the image you see right now is the latest Thingiverse project that my wife has me printing. And I love the printer. I hope Presa solves the MMU issues that I had, because I'd love to put the MMU back on my system and utilize it, because I think it's a great concept. I just had problems getting it to work. Hope this video helps you. Thanks, bye.